Good morning. Welcome to join session 3, Citizen Science and the SDGs. We will have 2 subsessions. The first is session 3.1, Citizen Science Contribution to the Monitoring of the SDGs, and session 3.2, Citizen Science for Agriculture and Food to Achieve the SDGs. If I could have my first slide, please. You can see on the slide that we will have Linda C. and Dilek Fraisl from the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis in Luxembourg, Austria, to run the first session 3.1, and Annette Richter from the Thunen Institute for Biodiversity, Jacob van Etten from the Research Director of Digital Inclusion, and Marianne van de Veld, a project leader, Digital Rural Landscape, to lead the Citizen Science for Agriculture and Food to achieve the SDGs, co-creating an EXA working group. During the session, you have the opportunity to write questions into the Vimeo chat. These will be monitored and passed through for a Q&A session immediately after session 3.1. And in session 3.2, you will have the opportunity for an interactive opportunity as the team pose you a series of questions on co-creating an EXA working group. So I'd like to hand over at this point to our first presenter, who is Linda C., who is a Senior Research Fellow in the Center for Earth Observation and Citizen Science at the Arias Institute, Luxembourg, Austria. Thank you very much. Over to you, Linda.
Okay, thanks very much. If you can put my slides up. Okay, my name is Linda C., as Martin introduced, and what I'm going to do is give you a brief overview of a paper that was published last year on how citizen science can support the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So this paper was born out of a workshop which we held at the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis. This is where I work. And we invited practitioners from citizen science, academia, UN organizations, as well as representatives from various citizen science associations to come together and talk about this topic. This paper is open access, so you can find it if you search on it, but we'll also put a link in the chat at some point during this session. Okay, so Rosa already talked about the SDGs this morning, so I'm not going to repeat that. I'm going to start from where she left off, which is that there are 232 indicators, and these indicators are divided into tiers. So tier 1 means that the indicator has an established methodology and it has data. Tier 2 means that the methodology is established, but the data are lacking. And tier 3 is when both the methodology and the data are lacking. So the development of indicators is a dynamic process. An expert group gets together and they develop these indicators. So for example, in October 2019, you can see that 104 of the indicators were tier 1. So an established methodology and data. By April 2020, this had increased to 115 tier 1 indicators. And there are no longer any tier 3 indicators. But nevertheless, you can see that really only half the indicators have an established methodology and data. Okay, so what is the source of data for the SDGs? Okay, so every indicator has a work plan, it has metadata, and if you consult it, you can see that there is an agency or multiple agencies responsible for the indicator. These are called custodian agencies. And then in the metadata is also the source of the data, if it's available, as I mentioned in tier 1. So what is the source? So it's mainly what we refer to here as traditional data sources. So from national statistical offices, censuses, household surveys, databases from other ministries and government agencies, international organizations such as the World Bank and OECD. Yet at the same time, there's this vast diversity of what we refer to here as non-traditional data. So Earth observation, commercial data such as mobile phone records, official sensor networks, and citizen-generated data, which includes citizen science. All these data, these non-traditional data, could be used for SDG reporting and monitoring. Okay, so one of the things we looked at in the paper is to ask the question, well, what value does citizen science data have for the SDGs? And we did this by looking at 5 dimensions of data. Okay, so space, time, theme, process, and data management. And then within each of these domains, we looked at attributes. So for example, in time, we have duration and resolution. And then for each of these attributes, we asked the question, well, what's the value that citizen science has for SDGs? How can they complement traditional data sources? So I'll just give you one example, say temporal resolution. Okay, so traditional data are expensive to collect. That's often why censuses, say, only take place every 5 or 10 years. But citizen science data can be collected much more frequently. So they can fill this temporal gap. They can increase the temporal resolution. Okay, so we did this process for each one of these attributes. And I won't go into this in detail, but if you're interested in the analysis we did, please consult the paper. Then, of course, we also address data quality. This is one of the most important issues raised with citizen science data. And it's clearly a barrier to use, particularly if the data are going to be used for official SDG reporting. So we raised 2 points about data quality in the paper. The first is that data quality can be evaluated in the same way as other geospatial data, using, for example, international standards. This means that there are already a set of established methods for assessing data quality, which can apply to citizen science data. But at the same time, there have been many innovative methods that have been developed in many different citizen science projects. I won't list them all. I mean, this audience knows all about this very clearly. So I think the point to be made here was simply about raising awareness that data quality is an issue, but there are lots of different methods for handling it, and also understanding what it is that the minimum data quality requirements are for SDG reporting. Okay, then we went on to look at what are examples of where citizen science is already contributing to some of the SDG indicators. So I'm not going to talk about that because Dilek will talk about that in much more detail. But then we focused on tier 2, and as I mentioned previously, tier 3, as there are no longer any tier 3 indicators. But these are the ones that have the most potential. They either have a methodology or they have no methodology, but they definitely don't have data. So these are still being developed, and this is a place where citizen science can contribute. So here are just a few examples. It's by no means comprehensive, but for example, in the Philippines, volunteer data collection of household census data on a series of different indicators, poverty, nutrition, health, etc., have been used to enhance the statistics on 32 SDG indicators. In Peru, the Regional Initiative for Hydrological Monitoring of Andean Ecosystems, which involves volunteers, has developed a robust and standardized protocol for water monitoring, which can contribute to SDG indicator 6.3.2, could, so doesn't at the moment, but could, and also target 6B. We thought that the involvement of citizens in monitoring food waste had a great deal of potential, which could contribute to SDG target 12.3. And there are many emerging applications of climate smart agriculture, which could contribute to SDG 13.3.2. But then, of course, there's also the potential beyond the SDGs. We know the SDGs are not a perfect framework. Okay, so for example, if we take air pollution, the indicators 3.9.1, which is the mortality rate attributed to household and ambient air pollution, and 11.6.2, the annual mean levels of particulate matter in cities. These are the only 2 indicators for air pollution. Okay, but the problem is they don't give us any actionable information, either at the city or the community level, for how to manage these conditions, nor do they contribute to an increased understanding of the health impacts of air pollution. So what we can do is use citizen science to provide complementary information on both air pollution and health. Here I've listed a series of projects, but you'll have seen from the program that this afternoon there's a session specifically on citizen science and air pollution. So I think you'll learn much more there. But the idea is that we could build a global network of projects on air quality, because there are many out there and many new sensors emerging. And then finally in the paper, we recognized that we needed a roadmap for the way forward. And we did this by differentiating into global, national, and local levels. I see my time is over, but I'm almost finished. Okay, so at the global level, we found a pathway, okay, that we could find a way for citizen science to be part of the official reporting and development indicator process. At the national level, we recognized that we needed to build an environment of trust for citizen science and national government agencies. So these are the agencies who are doing the reporting, such as national statistical offices. And then finally, at the local level, we realized that we have to support SDG relevant citizen science activities. Okay, so in conclusion then, as I am over time, we can see that SDGs are largely monitored using traditional data sources, but we have this data revolution. We have all these new non-traditional data sources available, like citizen science. We know contributions are already happening, but it's the tier 2 indicators where there's a great deal of potential. We have this roadmap, and we recognize that data quality and the creation of a trusted environment is really important. Okay, so if you could put your questions in the chat, I will then hand over to Dilek. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If we could hear from Dilek now, please, for the second half of this first session on the contribution of citizen science to the monitoring of the UN SDGs.
Thank you very much, Martin. And I think you can see my slides now. So I would like to start by thanking Linda for the great overview that she gave. Now I will present to you the research study that we undertook at the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis as part of the We Observe SDGs and Citizen Science Community of Practice. This is about citizen science contribution to the to SDG monitoring. And the results of this research study are published in the journal Sustainability Science, and the link is here, and I believe you will receive it in the chat as well. And our aim with this study was to present where exactly citizen science data are already contributing and could contribute to the SDG indicator framework. And this paper provides the first and only comprehensive overview that shows which SDG indicators could be supported by which citizen science initiatives. And as part of this research, we looked at the whole 244 SDG indicators. This was the number of indicators when we were undertaking this study. And we also looked at the citizen science initiatives at any scale from global to local to understand the current landscape and how all these initiatives could contribute to SDG monitoring. I would like to talk about our findings now briefly. In March 2019, UN Environment launched a report called Measuring Progress towards Achieving the Environmental Dimension of the SDGs. And this report analyzed the state of the environmental dimension of the SDGs. And the highlight was there are 93 environmental SDG indicators in the SDG indicator framework, and 68% of them lack data. And interestingly, one of our findings in this research was the greatest contribution from citizen science to SDG monitoring would be in environmental SDG indicators. So we see a great potential there. But let's see how these potentials are happening. So our results show that citizen science could contribute to the monitoring of 5 SDG indicators, and these are the green boxes here, and could contribute to the monitoring of 76, and these are the yellow boxes on this slide. And this is together 33% of the whole SDG indicator framework. And here the gray boxes show the indicators that we couldn't identify any alignment currently at this stage when we looked at the past or ongoing citizen science initiatives, but that doesn't mean that there's no potential for them in the future. Our research showed that the greatest potential from citizen science to the SDG framework would be in SDG 15, Life on Land, SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, SDG 3, Good Health and Wellbeing, and SDG 6, Clean Water and Sanitation. Now I would like to give some examples from our paper. For instance, citizen science initiatives on bird monitoring, eBird being one of them, and one of the most famous ones, are currently informing the SDG indicators 15.1.2 and 15.4.1. These are the indicators on biodiversity and protected areas. These projects could contribute to the monitoring, or are contributing to the monitoring of these indicators through the important bird and biodiversity area and key biodiversity area schemes. And these key biodiversity areas are sites designated as significantly contributing to the global biodiversity, and the largest subset of those are identified using data on birds. So that means, in addition to eBird, initiatives like Bird Track, Seabirds, the Pan-European Common Bird Monitoring Scheme, and many, many others, along with other resources such as published and unpublished literature and expert reviews and so on, could contribute, are already contributing to the monitoring of this indicator. Another example that I keep giving, because this is one of the most powerful examples, is the Leader Intelligence by Sustainable Coastlines. This is a project based in New Zealand, and this is already contributing and the indicator to the indicator that is about marine litter 14.1.1. So the data sets produced by Leader Intelligence are informing the national SDG reports of New Zealand, and because this initiative has been collaborating with the Ministry of the environment in New Zealand and Stats New Zealand since the start of the design phase of the program in 2016. And they use the results of this project in their official environmental reports, New Zealand government. Another example is EASA's very own picture pile, and this is picture pile has a potential to contribute to many of the SDG indicators. One example would be SDG indicator 152, that is about quantifying direct economic losses resulting from a disaster. This means the monetary value of total or partial destruction of assets in an affected area. So picture pile for post-disaster damage assessment is a project where volunteers classify satellite images to identify damaged buildings after a disaster occurs. And it's a very generic tool, actually, and flexible tool for ingesting imagery that can be rapidly classified by volunteers. And these images can be very high resolution satellite imagery, geotagged photographs, or imagery from drones. Examples of using picture pile for SDG monitoring purposes also include some indicators under SDG 1, for instance, like mapping poverty, or human settlement related indicators under SDG 11, or deforestation under SDG 15, or many other indicators in addition to the post disaster damage assessment. Another example is Freshwater Watch, and this is another actually a quite powerful example in terms of citizen science contributions. It's about the proportion of water bodies with good ambient quality. The data are not regularly produced because substantial investments are needed in terms of human and financial resources. So many of the countries are not able to do that, but citizen science initiatives such as Freshwater Watch and many others could actually provide a very valuable contribution to the monitoring of this indicator. Another example is Global Mosquito Alert, and this is to this could contribute to the monitoring of the indicator 333. This is about malaria incidences. So, for example, there's a community-based monitoring initiative in Mahefa that is called Malagasy Healthy Families. It's a community-based project that was run by the USAID and Madagascar Ministry of Public Health, and the program continues still today. And there are also other mosquito alert initiatives that provides data on mosquito populations. Could also provide meaningful contributions, supplementary contributions for these indicators. So I would like to mention that we are currently piloting the results of this research study together with the Ghana Statistical Office, UN Sustainable Solutions Network, FAO, and all the others you see here. And the aim is to produce step-by-step guidelines for national statistical offices for the use of citizen science data. I don't have much time left, so what I would like to say in this presentation, I was particularly focusing on the data contribution of citizen science because this paper is about that, but we also heard a lot about citizen science contribution in terms of mobilizing action towards the SDGs and many others. So if you want to learn more about these things, you can sign up for our SDGs COP as part of the WeObserve project, and as shown in the slide. And as the Citizen Science Global Partnership, we are producing an SDGs Resource Center. If you have any resource that you would like to share, please contact Libby Hepburn, as she's leading these efforts on this. So I'm happy to answer any questions, and thank you for your attention.
Okay, we have a number of questions coming in. So Aletta Bon is asking, how can citizen science as an activity itself work towards realizing the SDGs? I'm not sure whether Dilek or Linda would like to have a go at that. Linda, you're on mute. Oh, that's better. Thank you.
Actually, I think Rosie answered that question really nicely this morning in her presentation with this idea of localization. So, you know, you can have initiatives happening at the local level, which can address multiple SDGs, and it is a grassroots thing. So I think that for me is the answer. This is the real local effect.
Dilek, did you want to add any more to that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I also mentioned at the end of my presentation, and we're talking about action, we're talking about citizen science, mobilizing citizens worldwide to contribute to the SDGs meaningfully. I think, and I also agree with the localization being a very important aspect for citizen science to come in. So these are all very valuable things.
So Monica Susevics is also making the point that citizen science as a participatory process could contribute to certain SDGs, in effect bringing SDGs alive. So I think that's building on your thoughts there, Dilek. Would you like to add any more comment on that?
Yes, of course. I mean, we actually identified, as you saw, some of the examples, and I couldn't mention all of them. There are many other aspects that citizen science could contribute to the SDG monitoring or also SDG implementation. Actually, this has been making the SDGs more inclusive and more on the background, on the working with the citizens to be able to provide these contributions at any level. I don't know if Linda has anything to add to that, or?
No, but I just wanted to thank Darina for putting bits of Rosie's slides about define, monitor, and implement. I think that's a really nice way of framing how this could take place. But the other question about thinking about CS as a participatory process, I mean, has this been looked at? I think this is a really big area for research. So I think that's a great question, and is something that we can start looking into more.
Could I ask both of you what you think we should do to realize the full potential of citizen science data for SDG monitoring, and where we should start, and what the first few next steps are? And as you frame your answer, could you think through some of the solutions to the potential problems of what are really good local citizen science programs, but yet never seem to materialize to regional or scale at the global level? So in other words, you have a great project running in New Zealand, but it seems to be extremely difficult to get the same project running in Europe, or running in India, or running in South Africa. There seem to be real barriers to that sort of thing growing.
Sure. I mean, if we just go back to the roadmap, I mean, I think there are things happening at the global level, most definitely. I mean, Dilek is involved in talking to UNEP about on the marine pollution side. I think things are definitely happening at the national level. Dilek has a project, for example. Sorry, Dilek, you can also talk about this with the Ghana Statistical Office, where we're looking exactly at those questions. How can citizen science be used for some of the indicators? So I think there is stuff happening at global, national, and of course at local level. So you have all these, what you just mentioned, Martin, these sort of disparate projects. You know, there's something successful happening in one country, why isn't it happening in others? But as part of the roadmap, we said we need to identify those best practices, and we need to bring them forward so people can start seeing them and say, oh, that's happening there. Oh, maybe we should be trying that. Oh, that's really happening in the Philippines. Wow, we should be trying that. So I think some of it's just about communication and really putting out those good practice examples.
Dilek, in answering, in following that one up, is it about trying to get the national statistical offices working more closely together to mainstream some of these good citizen science programs, rather than being seen on the outside trying to push in, as it were, to the established methods?
I think if you look at the example that I provided now, already contributing with the, we will see that they really started when they were designing the project, this Sustainable Coastlines Litter Intelligence Program, together with the national statistical offices, and they were also involving UN and other relevant institutions as well. I think one of the important thing is like to create the key partnerships, bring all these important parties together, and not only talk to each other within the citizen science community, but really open up, involve these conversations, our conversations, UN institutions, and these national statistical offices as well. And I think there's one platform that is quite successful doing that, is the We Observe SDGs and Citizen Science Community of Practice. So this is where we're exploring how we could amplify these solutions with the national statistical offices. The reason why we are bringing national statistical offices forward, because they are at the driving seat of within the SDG monitoring efforts. So that's the reason why we need to work together with them, but also involving all those other stakeholders and also UN agencies that are custodians and so on.
Okay, I have an interesting comment from James Sprinks, who's asking, what do you think are the potential downsides of linking citizen science to the SDGs? So as we all get enthusiastic about the potential for citizen science and the SDGs, are there any downsides that we need to be aware of?
Well, first of all, probably what we can think of is that is more work for us. So now we are creating the demand within the global data and statistics community and the UN communities. And then once they realize the potential of citizen science data, they come back to you and they ask certain things, and they ask them very quick and very fast. So we need to be able to be ready to produce solutions for how we could include these citizen science into the official statistics and SDG monitoring purposes. I think this is one of the things that we could really start thinking about at this point of time.
Could I put another question to Linda, please, which is, how do you see citizen science doing more for the SDG process than just data contribution? So there is a risk that the National Statistical Offices just see this as a cheap way of gathering the data that they're obliged to return to the UN. So how can we see more input and more value from the citizen science component?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question. I think in the paper we really focused on data, but it's got to be way more than that. I mean, it's really involved on the implementation side, I think, is where citizen science has such a great potential. So like I said, I really focused on data, but didn't talk about the transformative power of citizen science and SDGs. I mean, this is a conversation we could have for a few hours, but I think, I think there just needs to be initiatives, and I think it is happening. So again, it's about communication. Say at the local level in cities where SDGs are becoming a big part of an agenda. So citizens are seeing that it's being part of a wide agenda, and they want to know how they can get involved. That might not be citizen science exactly, but there could be projects built around that, which then maybe transform personal behaviors, which lead towards this kind of transformation. So I think there's just loads of stuff. I think there's loads of papers and research to be done on that side, rather than just the data. And I think we don't just want to focus on the data by any means.
Okay. Another question coming in from Alexandra Villarroel, which is, do the local citizen science projects that you mentioned, are they actually considered by policymakers to monitor the SDGs? Or are they just good projects that are running, but the data never surfaces with the National Statistical Offices?
Well, some of the examples that I provided were already the ones that are contributing to the monitoring of the SDGs, and the other ones that we identified as they have great potential to contribute to. And I could only provide a few examples actually from the paper here, but we had like a supplementary table that we published with the paper that shows all these citizen science initiatives and all these indicators that they could support and why they could support and why we believe so. So this could also be downloadable with the paper, and there you could really see the details of all these things, like which ones could contribute, at what stage, if they are already contributing, how they could contribute it if they did, all sorts of other things. But not all of them, unfortunately, are at the stage of contributing, even though they have great potentials. But we are trying to explore that at this point.
Another question has come in from Liz Douthwaite, which is, is there a danger that the research agenda becomes dictated to us by those in charge?
Yeah, it's a good question. But we would also advocate that if governments were more involved in this process, it could be co-created. So yeah. I think yes and no to that question. There's some really interesting questions. I'm sorry that we can't answer all your questions during this short time.
I've got one last one for you, which is that the different cultures around the world sometimes make it difficult for citizen science projects to embed into the SDG reporting process. Would you like to comment on that and how you overcome those barriers?
I mean, I could give it a go, Linda. It's a matter of communication. It's a matter of understanding. So we cannot just basically simply take a model that worked in New Zealand and start implementing it, I don't know, somewhere like far, far away. All the countries, and they have different communications models. They have different types of, we are actually seeing that in Ghana as well. So what we are experiencing is we are trying to explore how we could monitor marine litter using citizen science approaches in Ghana, or how we could understand the mountain green cover in Ghana using citizen science approaches. But we cannot just basically take the global methodology that was produced by a UN agency and simply apply it there. We just need to understand how we could communicate, how we could involve all the relevant stakeholders and parties, and how we could design the whole thing together. I think this is the key. like designing the whole process together.
Okay. I think we have to wind up there, Dilek and Linda. Thank you very much for a very good session, and let's move on now to the second part of our proceedings today, which is citizen science for agriculture and food to achieve the SDGs. And I'd like to hand over now to Annette Richter to take us through Jacob, sorry, to take us through the first session. It is Annette, I have got it right. Annette Richter first, thank you. You're on mute, Annette.
Yes, so hello everyone. Should take over. So he's going to present our vision of the needs for an extra working group on the issue of SDGs and citizen science and agri-food systems. So Jacob is going to introduce some slides on the connectivity between the issue of food consumption, food production, and citizen science. So Jacob, over to you.
Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you. So I hope you see my screen right now. Very good. So I will now bring up my PowerPoint. Okay, that works, right? That should be okay right now. Okay, so this presentation is about the co-creation of an EXA working group. So what we are proposing as a group is to create another working group within the EXA structure about agri-food systems. So who is we? We is Annette Richter, who works at the Thunen Institute in Germany, leading there a group on citizen science specifically. Myself, Jacob van Netten, I work for the CGIAR, which is an international network of agricultural research institutes, and I work on digital inclusion, which also includes a lot of citizen science. Marianne van der Velde works at the Joint Research Center of the European Union, leading project on digital rural landscape lab, also involving a lot of data-oriented citizen science projects on crops, in situ data collection, land use, and digital technologies. So the objective of this session, and I have the first presentation, then we will have a number of other activities, is to present the idea of the EXA working group, then explain the rationale of it, and also getting your feedback on it. So we have an interactive part as well that will be led by Marianne, and then Annette will wrap up. So EXA working groups, there are many of them on specific topics, on very broad topics, so networks or policy, strategy, governance, but then also a number of working groups on specific topics like air quality or the global mosquito alert. What we are proposing is to have another one which is about agri-food systems. And in this session, we want to use it to get some feedback on that idea. Why agri-food systems? So what is interesting about agri-food systems or food systems is that it really links many of the sustainable development goals that we've been talking about this morning and in 2 sessions now. But food is really connecting many of them. So if you look at the picture on the left, you see, for example, of course, diversification at the bottom, climate change, sustainability of fisheries and animal welfare. But also if you go to the economic one on food loss and waste, and then of course citizen science itself, malnourishment and overnourishment on the left, in the left upper one, on the nurturing communities one. Then also even the education one, of course, is covered by citizen science. So what is interesting in this agri-food system lens, the way of looking at say our outside reality through an agri-food system lens, is that we can connect issues across disciplines. So the example that we have there is, for example, what is the link between environmental sustainability and diets? So rather than focusing on just one component, having this link, And that can help to look at different trade-offs and how we can influence policies through citizen science, but not just one element of it, but also their overall coherence. Citizen science in this context links to very different stakeholders, so scientists plus all sorts of other stakeholders, so farmers, but also processors, consumers, other land managers, people who have an influence on diets, for example. It addresses issues of nurturing communities who care about certain landscapes, for example. It involves education, inclusion of different groups around knowledge generation objectives. We also think, and there's literature on it, that it can address what is called undone science. So it can bring new questions to the table that we haven't been asking before in scientific research, that are very important to certain social movements or civil society. So we think that citizen science right now doesn't always address agri-food system issues in a kind of a systemic way. We do parts and bits, but bringing it together could be very powerful to make citizen science really have an impact on sustainability and the SDGs. So some examples, we do think that there are a number of examples, and they do start to bring different elements together. For example, biodiversity monitoring, which is a very important topic in citizen science, but doing this on agricultural land, for example, in Austria, where people then link that to how they manage their farms and draw conclusions on different management practices. Monitoring agricultural land use and land use changes, linking local data to Earth observation data through remote sensing, for example. Very interesting model in this context is the Agro-Ecosystems Living Laboratories, which are place-based initiatives that bring together around a certain place all sorts of types of science and sensors to look at agroecological intensification of agricultural systems. Then something that I have been working on a bit with my team is the selection of agricultural practices by having farmers testing on their farms a series of practices and then comparing with each other. And there's a digital platform that does that systematically. We do that in many countries called klimop.net. So a number of examples, but we think they could be much stronger if we tie them much more together and we give it a much stronger agri-food system focus. So citizen science has many benefits for agri-food research specifically. The kind of benefits that we also see in other citizen science areas, and probably there are even more than this, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in the interactive session as well. So some of this to generate new scientific insights, democratizing learning, and then also this very place-based focus of citizen science can help as well, bringing these different elements together. So I leave it here right now, and I give the floor to Marianne to start the interactive session.
Yes, hello everyone. A warm welcome from me as well. My name is Marianne. I'm working at the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. Thanks, Jacob, for introducing this first part. We're now moving into the interactive part of this session. We had, of course, wanted to meet you all and to discuss with you live what your ideas or expectations would be for such a potential working group on citizen science for agri-food systems. But as you know, that's not possible. So we will try now to do something interactive, and we will try to use Slido. And in Slido, we will ask different questions depending on how much time we've left, 4 to 6 questions, where you can give us some feedback so that we have at least some opportunity to get some of your ideas and thoughts on this topic. Would you be interested to support such a working group? What sort of activities would you see such a working group develop? and would you have time to contribute to this? So let me tell you that by now you should have received a link to the Slido website. So please click on this link. I'm also aware that there should be about 20 seconds delay between me speaking and you hearing what I say. So I will give some time also during you answering the poll questions to make sure that we receive all your answers. So let's see how this goes. Let's try to make the most of it. I'm going to open the first poll question. I hope you have received the link. If needed, you have to enter a number there, which you should also have received in your chat window. And I'm going to now start the first poll. So the first poll question that we pose, the first question is actually just to get a little bit of an idea of who is listening in today. And the question is, what is your involvement in citizen science research for agri-food systems? So you can, as soon as you have seen this poll, you can start answering when you want. You can actually add several answers to the question. So you can select multiple boxes. And the question is, what is your involvement in citizen science research for agri-food systems? The potential answers are, in the past, I have contributed to a citizen science project in the field of agri-food systems as a researcher. I have contributed to such projects as a stakeholder, or I'm currently contributing to a citizen science project in the field of agri-food systems as a researcher, or I currently take part in a citizen science project in agri-food systems as a stakeholder. Then these three other answers that you may also select, I have used actually outputs from citizen science projects in agri-food systems. Here you can think about, for example, policy recommendations or specific data that was generated and that you have used for your own research objectives. Or you have the idea that in the future I would like to use citizen science in my research, or you would consider being a stakeholder in the future. And if everything goes well, we should actually be seeing the answers to the poll coming in. I have to look, where are the results? Let me see, I don't see the results right now. Oh yeah, here, right. Okay, so we have people coming in already. We have now more than 35 answers, and it's still increasing. As you can see, this is live, and besides the answer that you provided yourself, you also see that you can see the answers that everyone else is giving. And so we have for sure a large enthusiasm for everyone that would like to be a stakeholder, because while I guess we have a lot of researchers here, we are also, of course, stakeholders and citizens ourselves. One of the things that I like also about this working group is the idea that, again, we try to bring citizens and farmers closer together, to think together about how can we design agri-food systems that are sustainable. Because there's lots of sustainability challenges, and there's lots of ways where citizens and farmers can actually learn from each other and try to improve the system. So yes, major one that's settling. We're all very willing to be stakeholders, and we're all also very active currently. So far, everyone that is here is currently contributing as a researcher to a citizen science project, or not everyone, but a large percentage. 23, a quarter of all the people here. A quarter also has contributed in the past. And actually we have very little stakeholders here. Although we would be willing to be stakeholders, currently we have very little stakeholders. And I guess that's also a bit the nature of the event that is online, where I guess if we had been there in real life in Trieste, we probably would have had a bit more stakeholders to attend as well. But that's perfectly fine. So, okay, I'm going to close this poll now and we move on to the second question. I'm going to open the second question. The second question actually is, please tell us how an EXA working group on agri-food systems could help you in your work. And please finish this sentence. An EXA working group can support me in, and then you can add 5 responses, let's say. So every word that you add will actually become part of a word cloud. So I see the first entries already coming in. This is about networking, it's about community building, it's about sharing data, it's about sharing experiences. How can we actually try to improve the way how citizen science projects that have proven to be successful at a local scale, how can they scale to other places? What sort of barriers should we identify and should we overcome to make sure that citizen science can always scale and then also link from the local to the regional to the national and even to the international level? I'm seeing a lot of answers coming in now. Very nice. Lots of different answers. I see one answer which is ciao, so I'm saying hello to you as well. A lot of learning, helping to network, exchange ideas. I'm going to leave this one open a little bit longer. There's a lot of enthusiasm, I have to say, for this working group. I think we have a lot of similar ideas, and we also really thought we need to find a way to have a spider in the web where there is a common point where we can share these experiences. It's a very broad field, but it's also a field where a lot of activities connect. We're not only talking about agriculture and food, we're also talking about land use and biodiversity and sustainable agriculture, talking about how farming itself can improve and how citizens can have their say in how they would like their food to be produced. So still a lot of answers are coming in. Okay, I'm going to leave this open for a little bit longer because the answers are still coming in. For me, I'm not seeing now the word cloud. Let me do a check. Yes, okay, now I see the word cloud. Very good. So if it's correct, you should be seeing the word cloud, and the largest word by now, which has most entries, is networking, sharing best practice, new ideas, lots of ciao, which is also very cool. Technology, let's not forget all the opportunities that digital technology is giving us. We see, of course, all the applications that we now have and that can easily allow us to share data with a specific and precise geospatial location. Okay, I'm going to stop this one now as well. Still things are coming in, but I'm stopping it now. And we move on to the third question in our poll. And the third question, which I open now, is actually related to the first activity that we want to do as part of this, let's say, nascent working group. We still have to establish it, of course. And the first thing we want to do is to actually start writing a scientific review on what is currently out there. Can we map the research landscape of past, current, and future citizen science project for agri-food systems? And the intention is to do that in the next 6 months. This should also help us to get a better idea of what is out there, and also not forget to also focus what this working group should be about. So I see many responses coming in as well, which is good to know. If you're interested, please make sure to drop a line to either me, Annette, or Jacob, and we'll keep track of those people that are interested to become an active co-author of this publication. So very good variety of opinions here. Large share of people actually interested in contributing to such a research paper. So I think I'm going to stop now. We have had only 3 questions. We had more, but time is running out. What I do want to say is that later this year, we intend to send around a much more detailed survey, and I hope that we will be able to also have your contributions there and help us, if we want to make such a working group, to help shape it so that it is something that can really contribute to some concrete tasks and achieve a better, let's say, citizen science for agri-food systems. Okay, so I'm going to stop this one now, and I'm going to give the floor to Annette. Thank you so far.
Yes, thank you very much, Marianne. And could Jacob please share the screen with the next slide, please? So before we see the slides, I'd like to thank you all for your participation on the polling session. It was an experiment, and we received some very insightful information about your views of the community, of our audiences of this session. And we share this great vision to really connect people who have this interest in agri-food systems, citizen science, and sustainability. And there should be one slide about the network. Jacob, could you please show me this slide where it shows our, yes, thank you. Our understanding of what is the greatest power of citizen science is the human power, the power of people, people here as indicated by these icons. And in particular, in the agro-food system, we see there are so many stakeholders and people who we believe should be connected, should exchange their ideas, and also to foster their energies and knowledge. As we have heard in the previous session, this new knowledge about SDGs and the implementation of SDGs. So here we really want to try with this XI working group to make use of the power of the people and to connect people who are already involved in citizen science and agri-food systems, but also those ones who would like to establish more citizen science initiatives and activities in this field. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we really hope that by the end of the session, we achieved our objectives where we presented some of our ideas on the XR working group. Jacob introduced us about the science and SDGs and sustainability, and your very nice and important feedback on our idea is really encouraging us to move on with this idea, to connect the community with this topic on citizen science and agri-food systems. So next slide, please. Thank you. So here is our proposed roadmap or timescale. So first of all, if you would like to be involved in our next steps, please send us your contact details. We have established a gmail.com email address, agrifoodexa. Please get in contact with us, where we will get back to you with, for example, the summarized session, which will be in a short mini report where we will give you some feedback on the outcomes of the poll, but also provide our slides. Further, as mentioned before, we would like to open up the survey with more questions to better understand the potential scope of this working group. So what could be our major objectives and how do we really would like to move on with the XR working group. Further, we are going to propose this working group to the XR board, and of course we will need to launch the working group. So here, if you would like to take part and be part of this process, please drop us your contact details. And as mentioned before, we would like to invite you to be a co-author of our review publication to be presented at the next EXA conference. So this is going to be the last or one of the future tasks for this group of people with this interest in better understanding the landscape of citizen science and agri-food system and research in this regard. So with this last slide, I wish to thank you all for this session, and hope we will meet again in person or digitally, and I will give back to Martin. Thank you very much on behalf of our presenters, and see you soon. Thank you.
Okay, we still have a couple of minutes before we're due to finish. So let me put one question that's come into Annette, which is that issues with farmers are possibly different from country to country, e.g. no internet mobile phone services in the middle of nowhere farms in Australia. So I guess the question is, how do you engage with farmers in different cultural settings and in different remote geographical areas?
Yeah, well, I'm not so much experienced in this topic yet, so I think Jacob could answer this question much better. But we do see the unequal distribution of connections is a challenge, and we think that maybe both digital tools but also analog tools should be still available and in use, and we should make use of also like diaries and working groups or interactive sessions which are taking place on the ground with the farmers at the farmer's property, and this could help us to overcome this challenge. But Jacob, you have worked in this field in the past with a lot of farmers.
Yes, exactly. So one of the key things is to really invest in, say, the design around the appropriate channels for farmers to use, if it's farmers or consumers. So interactive voice response, for example, is a very interesting one. We're used to many apps for citizen science use smartphones, but you can use feature phones if it's interactive voice response. And then also this kind of mediation by field agents of organizations that go out, use analog formats that then are easily digitized. So you need to plan and think about this process, but it's not said that citizen science is only limited to digital tools in all phases of a certain effort, right? You can have this interesting mix of analog tools. So Annette mentioned diaries or forms where you fill out something and then you take a picture of it. There are many different ways to capture data from even illiterate citizen scientists. Sorry.
Okay. I think we're actually drawing to a conclusion now. I think it just beholds me to thank all our key speakers for the contributions they've made to these two important areas of SDGs and citizen science, but also in looking at how you link the agri-food industry into the citizen science process. And I can only wish you well with your endeavours to set up a working group in what I think is a really interesting area, and one which takes citizen science into new fields, as it were, in trying to draw the agricultural community in. So thank you all for your participation. I understand the slides will be made available to members who've come to listen to the presentations in due course. And you've had the links, if you're interested in the Agri working group, to follow through and send your emails in. So thank you all very much for the speakers, and thank you for all participating in today's event. Thank you. Cheerio.
Thanks, Martin, for sharing the session, and thanks to the other presenters.
Thanks. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Hey, hey, hey.